use of this. And are you in a good mood after talking about moods so much? I hope you are. Well, first of all, what I am presenting is a sort of summarization of a rather extended paper that you can find in the current issue of Anthrozone, and that you can read more in detail if you want to go further into understanding what this argument is. In 15 minutes, it's a little bit complicated to build a bigger picture. Nevertheless, we'll try. And to capture it in one go, all I can say is that I'm very much interested in issues of participation, which those of you who are familiar with my journal probably have already encountered. So the questions I'm interested in are very much revolved around wider audiences. How do we get across the animal studies debate to wider audiences? And when I say wider audiences, I mean outside academia, outside scientific research. And that's, of course, a big challenge. And, of course, I believe that art can play a big role in reaching wider audiences. It might reach audiences that are not interested in science, that are not interested in natural history, and that may have actually not come into contact with the animals in other circles. So there's, of course, a lot that can be done by contemporary art in order to engage audiences with the subject. So the way I've structured the paper is basically divided in two halves. The first half looks at what I personally believe are four very influential works of art produced over the past 10 years within the umbrella of human-animal studies. Now, this is actually, Anthony asked me a year ago to write a kind of review of what has happened in art over the past 10 years, so that's pretty much its fault. And I have chosen four works of art, which, of course, some of you might disagree, do not capture the essence. It's really, a lot has been done, and I feel, obviously, guilty of omission here. Nevertheless, I have chosen the artworks I've chosen because they do, in a way, go beyond the animal studies jargon, the animal studies agenda, and they reach for wider audiences in a number of ways that we're going to explore together. So I find them particularly useful and effective for what I'm interested in. The first work in question is probably a work some of you are familiar with. It's called Nanook, Flat Out and Bluesome by artist duo Brenda Snebian Dottir and Mark Wilson. And it's a very, very complex multimedia installation gathering together, as what you see here in a shot taken at Spike Island, a large number of taxidermy polar bears. I'm sure you're all aware that taxidermy is back in fashion. You're all aware of that, right? No? Oh, it's majorly back in fashion, I can tell you that. And it's a very interesting and complex phenomenon. That's what my PhD is about. It's about trying to understand why right now taxidermy seems to have lost that totally negative aura and seems to have resurfaced in underground circles from goth to cinema. Everyone seems to be excited about taxidermy animals. And what Mark and Brindis, I know that everybody's very problematic, pardon me. But what Mark and Brindis have tried to achieve with Nanook is quite outstanding. So they've basically proceeded to track down polar bear taxidermy specimens in the UK. You can see already the link there. How these taxidermy bears, polar bears, appear in the UK. Of course, they are the result of imperialism, the result of a relational with the animal that today we do question very much. And by finding them in different collections around the country, in different cupboards, they've really found some bears lying about, completely forgotten, covered in dust, which sounds a little bit criminal, but there they were. And gathering them together in an exhibition, suddenly they critically addressed these taxidermy bodies so that they don't stand anymore for the specimens that we look at the Natural History Museums. They acquired different signification that can only take place in the gallery space. So amongst other things, what Nanook achieves through also a series of photographs that are collected in a book along with some very interesting essays is to get us to think about the practice of taxidermy in a different way and reevaluate the ties that taxidermy as a practice might bear with imperialism, with museum displays, of course, and, oops, we've gone far too far. Sorry, there you go. And most especially with the cultural lives of animals. So what happens after an animal is dead, that's not necessarily the death of the animal itself. It is from a biological perspective, but having talked about representation in the past, over the past few papers, we all are very much aware that the role played by representation and animal representation is paramount when it comes to shaping our understanding and relational with the animals. So some have argued that a dead animal body is not actually just a dead animal body, and that it does continues to do a great work in the creation of meaning. So I have chosen Nanook as one of the seminal works of art produced over the past 10 years within the umbrella of human-animal studies, because it does address a number of issues that are very core to the human-animal studies debate. But at the same time, the installation was a traveling installation that was exhibited throughout the country in museums open to the public, so not in universities, foyers, or university galleries, and that's a very important aspect. These artists have managed to persuade curators of institutions such as the Horniman Museum in London to actually hold this exhibition there. And of course, the audiences that go to places like the Horniman Museum, we're thinking of families with children, we're thinking of pretty much anybody interested in culture, offers the opportunity for engagement with what we discuss at conferences that otherwise might never take place. Another work of art that I have sampled as seminal when it comes to the human-animal studies discourse is Marcus Coates' Dawn Chorus, which we have looked at yesterday, and this is my opportunity to show you a shot in which you can appreciate what the installation looked like. So 19 screens playing at unison, unlike yesterday during the film screening where we looked at the individual screenshots. I'm just going to look at a couple of minutes of this. There we go again into the individual shots, which are not particularly important to us at this stage. But again, what Marcus Coates achieves with his installation is very, very complex, and it can be accessed on so many different levels. Once again, this was exhibited at Baltic, which is a major exhibiting space. So general visitors, art lovers, general public being able to think about the animal from a different perspective. And what Marcus Coates brings together in his video works usually draws from philosophy. He's a big fan, or very much interested in Deleuze and Guattari's work on the becoming animal. Most of his early career is shaped on the elusive philosophical concept of the becoming animal. And again, I don't know how many of you have had the pleasure to read The Becoming Animal in 1,000 Plateaus by Deleuze and Guattari, but it's definitely not a just before going to bed read. And most of us will probably decide not to engage with it for whatever reason. But what Marcus Coates does is that it creates that interest, it creates that suggestion that there might be something more at play that can be accessed. And then it's up to the gallery viewer to pursue this further and perhaps venture to read ideas revolving around the becoming animal. Dawn Chorus most especially brings together the idea of the cyborg as well, put on the map by Donna Haraway, and also comments on power-knowledge relationships. You've probably noticed how these people are everyday people, like all of us, and they are captured in their environment. That was very instrumental and important to the artist. And this goes on and on and on. We could talk about this work for a couple of hours at least, but there's an educational side to most of Marcus Coates' works, whereby in this case, he does make overt the idea that the Dawn Chorus, which is such a romantic idea after all, it's instead a very aggressive demarcation of space, territory, and power amongst birds. and therefore translated here within a human realm can offer itself to different readings. And another work of art I've chosen, it's called Augmented Fish Reality by Ken Ronaldo, who's interested in robotics. And in this case, the work itself involves a live animal in the gallery space. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the beautiful Siamese fighting fish. Does anyone have one as a pet? Yes, good. Well, it's you and I. There you go. I suggest you do get one. They are extremely clever little fish, and they have a very pronounced personality. What they do is that they're very territorial again, and the artist has exploited this specific trait. Mind you, the fish has been selected over time by us for the purpose of fighting, so the history of the Siamese fighting fish is quite convoluted. But because it's so territorial, that means that it's very much aware of its surrounding. You cannot keep two male fighter fish in the same tank. One, they will fight until one dies. So that's a very, very specific little lovely fish. And the fact that it's very aggressive allows the fish to control these robotic machines. So each fish is placed in the bowl that you see at the top. The structure is very complicated in a kind of mechanical sense. I really cannot do it justice here, but to explain it very quickly, the fish controls the whereabouts of the tank. The tank has wheels at the bottom of the pediment, and the fish can move the tank around. And that, of course, evaporates that boundary between us and whatever is in the water, which is the main relational problem that we face with these underwater creatures. And it's a very interesting project because, of course, the fish will swim or direct these machines toward each other. They will want to look at the viewers as well, who are allowed to walk around the perimeter of the installation. So to kind of create this relational between us and fish, which is, of course, very difficult. And Edouardo Cats, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. This is a picture from GFP Bunny 2000. The engineered bunny to contain jellyfish genes which are regularly produced by scientific laboratories for cancer research, and that the artist claimed as a work of art, created huge controversy. This was on the front page of many newspapers. So again, getting the animal studies message up there. And I know you might have a few questions about how much that is. What Edouardo Cats' work on is an animal studies message, but we can discuss that later. And following these four works actually pose questions related to what's going on in the mainstream. So the four works I've presented have all received extensive coverage to a degree. They have not received the coverage that this work of art, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, has received, and other works of art by Damien Hirst involving dead animals, or Matt Collishaw, who's another very visible artist from the young British art period. And you might have come across papers that in the past have pretty much attacked such works just on the grounds that the animal is killed in the work, for the work, or appears dead in the work. And part of the argument I put forward in my paper is that we need to rethink this approach for the purpose of involving wider audiences. Criticizing them and stigmatizing them is not necessarily doing us, for our cause, any favor. Most people out there who are not necessarily engaging with what we say and what we write are very likely to know about this work, and this work, but not about all the others. And therefore, their understanding of the animal is shaped much more by these than the other works produced within the human-animal studies umbrella. And that's not to say that things may not change, but I think there's a sort of responsibility and a level of thinking that we need to give to the broader discourse of art to understand what's going on more clearly. And on that one, I think we can move on to questions. Thank you.